think you were right in the last 15 minutes to think about next steps. You know, what might be some of the priority steps for the Mexican governance project to think about. And I think one of the things we should do is, I mean, clearly the first step is to do some review work, to do some synthesis and review work of past experiences. And I think this element of whether problem structures in the oceans and problem structures on land, to what extent they're similar, to what extent they're different, I think this is an empirical question. I don't think we should assume the ocean is all different. I mean, land, we forgot about below ground carbon, etc. We've had all the same kind of dilemmas as well. So, but I think that an initial review, you know, for this task force, one of the things I'd like them to see them do is to do that initial comparative first cut at how ocean governance is the same and different from different fields of other types of commons that we have to manage that we've got a long history of insight. And I expect that will lead to a set of propositions rather than strong conclusions. And that could be quite useful for framing the next set of research. Because I still have some faith in that there's some problem structures that have certain types of solutions. I'm not saying it's blueprints, but I still think the things that we've learned from your work, Laura, but of course from Eleanor Ostrom's work, and even from the more political strategy of active view, we've also learned there's things that tend to work. And so I'd like to see this, one of the first steps for a task group is really to do this first cut at comparing these things and pull out the big propositions. And I think then see what happens, but I imagine that will lead to some rather intriguing research.
Just a quick comment on two directions that I see emerging here. One of them is the group of Earth Systems Governance scholars picking issues and areas that they would like to focus on and developing those and working with those, which I think is an important one. But the other angle of it, and I guess the one I was pushing a bit when I spoke, is to get Earth Systems Governance people to engage with existing initiatives. And Aaron is speaking to some extent about that. There are initiatives like the Large Marine Ecosystem and various other initiatives that have selected areas, are working in them, trying to address problems, but largely from a natural science point of view. And I'd like to think that a strategy of engagement would also be a part of the work of the task force. And I myself, back in the beginning of the 2000s, got involved in a fisheries governance and food security network at the University of Amsterdam as a natural scientist. And there were 30 of us from all kinds of disciplines, natural science, economics, political science, social science. And it took us about 2 years to learn to talk to each other. And it was there were some quite uncomfortable times, and times when all of us felt that let's forget this thing and go back and do our own disciplines. And I would like, you know, I think that this engagement is going to have its discomforts and may not always be met with open arms, but I think it's a critical part of a strategy if we're going to do something from this side to try and remove that divide that is there. So I would like to see that in the strategy.
Well, Raman, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, obviously, there's an interest in oceans governance from a governance research point of view, but I think that the motivation behind this initiative is there's also an opportunity and a need for engagement with people who are coming either from a natural science background or from a management policy sort of background, where there really is a chance to sort of engage with governance questions in practice. In that regard, we have had some conversations, Robin, you've been part of it, but some conversations with people in several of the LMEs. And one idea in terms of this engagement is that, obviously it's not exclusive, but one idea is that it may very well be that there are several of the LMEs that have management arrangements or people involved in management activities that might be quite interested in engaging from their side with this sort of thing. I have this sense that this may be the case in the Caribbean, but you can speak to that. I know it's very much the case in the, for example, the Somalia Huguyas current LME, and there may be others as well. So obviously that's not meant to be an exclusive kind of strategy or way to go forward, but it may be one entry point for this engagement process that you referred to.
Denise Garcia from Northeastern University in Boston. So along the lines of what Robin was saying, and also Michelle, thinking from a strengthening international law perspective, so I'm thinking about how can we, with the task force, strengthen the existing multilateral elements of the global governance of this area. So how can we think about strengthening compliance of UNCLOS in particular as perhaps the primordial multilateral structure for this governance apparatus? I also thought about perhaps identifying, let's say, 3 areas where governance is lacking within there. So that could be one task for the task force, perhaps. And I think Louis very wisely pointed to one area, which is the certification scheme, for instance, for fisheries. And then, of course, once we identify areas that are lacking in the governance apparatus, we can perhaps act as advocacy, applying pressure on the already existing pressure groups and involved groups in trying to bring change. Yeah. Thank you.
Again, association from the university. Again, 3 points. One point to really, you suggested making reviews. As I'm involved in this social science research project on international tuna fisheries governance, we are doing that review on the tuna issue already, so we can maybe contribute to that. And second point is how about involving the media people into the task force. I don't know if it works, but definitely the media cannot participate in the tuna fishery negotiations. So it can be a bridge from the research and media and the negotiations, from the negotiations to the research and to the media. So, and especially the Japanese media are very, I'm also, I also don't know everything, but the Japanese media on fisheries are very much uneducated. Like, for example, there was this, the WCPFC, the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission scientific committee published a report on the Pacific bluefin tuna, and it says